So most people think of injuries as if they're some unfortunate thing that just happens to them, as if they've been struck down by the gods in some unenviable bad luck. But the reality is that it's often a case of death by 1,000 cuts. And what I'm going to do today is explain to you how stress and how different forms of stress are perceived by the body and the impact that it's going to have on your recovery rates. So we all have an intuitive understanding of what we mean by stress, but it comes in many forms, and some of which you probably don't even recognise. So we have physical stress and we have psychological stress. Physical stress is often perceived as what we would do in the gym, so anything that results in hard physical effort. It's often measured via heart rate or heart rate variability. And then we have psychological stress, which could be anything from the argument with your partner before you go to work, deadlines, reports, financial pressures, or maybe even that Karen at work that thinks that words are violence. So if you're experiencing a lot of psychological stress, then naturally exercise is a very good way of helping you manage that. But one thing that you might be misunderstanding when it comes to your exercise and its impact on your injury risk is that stress is perceived by the body in one way. This line here is the amount of stress that you can tolerate on a daily or weekly basis, let's say. So we've got an objective level, and we'll come on to how we'll measure this in a second. You've then got a little bit of work stress. You've then got your argument before work. You've got the fact that the weather's shit. You've got your boss being a dickhead. And you'll now notice that we really don't have a huge amount left in the tank. So what you do is you say, well, I'm stressed, I'll go to the gym. And I thrash myself to here. And naturally you think, well, it's okay, I'm only just above it. But then you chuck in a night of poor sleep, an Indian on the weekend, and you'll notice that this level is quite clearly above what you can tolerate. And it's in this danger zone here where the likelihood of you getting injured skyrockets. So the way we bring that stress back down is we focus on having healthy and loving relationships. You focus on getting a good night's sleep. You focus on having a job that you don't hate. And then you find that when you come back to thrashing yourself in the gym for 60 minutes a day, you're under your threshold. So all these things are what I would classify as systemic stress. Now in regards to injuries, systemic stress has a very large bearing. But we've also got what we classify as a localised stress. So localised really is the local site of your injury. So for example, let's say you roll your ankle playing football. Now the load that is applied into the ankle when you roll it is what we would define as the stress, and the ankle itself is the localised area. So an injury occurs when the load applied to the tissue exceeds the load-bearing capacity of the tissue. So naturally we take the positions where we're weakest, such as in that rolled ankle position, and naturally you say, well, that's a vulnerable position, so I'm not going to train there. But it's a vulnerable position because I don't train there. But in reality, we are weakest where we don't train. So if you can spend some time building up your tolerance to the positions, then when you get into the carnage of the real world and you're running or you're playing sport or whatever it may be, your ability to handle the positions drastically improves. Now naturally, people will say, well, how on earth are you supposed to train yourself in those compromised positions? And you can do exercises like this or like this, and people will inevitably say, well, that's stupid and it's dangerous. But they're wrong, simply because injuries occur when the load applied to a tissue exceeds the load-bearing capacity of that tissue. So the more we load it in a specific fashion, the higher the likelihood of us being able to handle the loads of the real world. So we've explained a little bit about stress. What I'm going to help you to understand now is how we measure that stress. So we have this thing called HRV, or heart rate variability. So heart rate variability is the time between heartbeats. So what you'll see here between the R wave is the exact amount of time between your heartbeats, and it is this score that gets measured. So the higher your heart rate variability is, the better. And it's not necessarily about having an objective measurement, so there's no point really comparing mine to yours or to Lance Armstrong's, but it's about having a bank of data that you can look at over a period of probably at least a month. Heart rate variability will actually indicate to you how much of a physiological stress you are under. If you're finding that your usual HRV is around 0.75, and under current circumstances over the last 7 days, you find that your HRV is currently down at 0.5, 0.55, that's a pretty good indicator that you're under some significant physiological stress. So when we look at the whole bigger picture of your likelihood of picking up an injury, what you will find is your systemic stress is high if your HRV is low. And then when you layer on top of that your increase in training volume or whatever it may be, you're then going to see that your localized stress, it has also increased. So if this all made sense to you and you like this video, then click on this video either here or here and find out exactly how I rehab my clients.